In the Imperium of Man, there are many powers that shape the fate of entire worlds. There are the Space Marines, forged for war. There is the Astra Militarum, vast enough to drown planets in bodies and steel. There is the Ecclesiarchy, feeding faith to untold billions. And then there is the Adeptus Mechanicus, the priesthood of Mars, keepers of the machine, masters of sacred industry, and guardians of knowledge so ancient that much of humanity no longer remembers where it came from. They are everywhere, and yet they remain strangely apart. On every battlefield, their engines walk beside imperial armies. In every hive, their systems hum beneath the walls. In every starship, in every weapon, in every manufactorum, in every reactor core, there is the touch of Mars. The Imperium can pray without them. It can fight bravely without them, but it cannot function without them. Strip away the priests of the machine, and the whole vast empire begins to fail, piece by piece, world by world, until darkness swallows it from within. That is what makes the Adeptus Mechanicus so fascinating. They are not simply engineers in red robes. They are not merely technicians with strange rituals and a taste for augmentation. They are a civilization inside a civilization. A faith hidden inside an empire of faith. A scientific order that fears innovation. A mechanical priesthood that preserves humanity by steadily becoming less human. And at the center of all of it stands Mars, ancient, secretive, and powerful beyond what most citizens of the Imperium could ever imagine. Tonight, we are going deep into the lore of the Adeptus Mechanicus. We will trace how Mars rose from near death to become the technological heart of mankind. We will look at the beliefs of the machine cult, the meaning of the Omnissiah, the power structure of the priesthood, the great forges, the sacred quest for knowledge, and the hidden influence the Mechanicus holds over the Imperium at large. We will also explore one of the great tensions at the center of Warhammer 40,000, the idea that humanity's survival depends on machines, but its fear of the past has turned knowledge itself into something sacred, dangerous, and half-forgotten. Because the secrets of Mars are not only about industry, they are about memory, about control, about the relics of a brighter age buried beneath ash and doctrine, and about the long question that hangs over the red planet and its priesthood like incense over an altar. Do the tech priests truly serve mankind, or does mankind now serve the machine? To understand the Adeptus Mechanicus, we have to begin long before the Imperium, long before the Emperor's Great Crusade, and even long before Mars became the shrine world we know in the 41st millennium. We have to begin in humanity's earlier golden ages, when technology was not guarded by chanting priests, but expanded boldly by a civilization that believed progress had no ceiling. In the distant past, during the great ages of human expansion, Mars was transformed from a barren world into one of humanity's crowning achievements. Terraforming projects, industry, scientific development, and interplanetary infrastructure remade the Red Planet. It became not just a colony, but a center of learning and production. Mars stood close to Terra, and because of that proximity, it played an enormous role in mankind's rise through the solar system and beyond. During the dark age of technology, human science reached heights that in the 41st millennium are almost mythic. Artificial intelligences, self-repairing systems, weapons of terrifying sophistication, and standard template construct systems allowed colonies separated by impossible distances to replicate the tools and machines they needed. This era gave humanity the means to spread through the stars in astonishing numbers. It was an age of confidence, invention, and power. Mars benefited immensely from this. The planet became layered industry, laboratories, vaults, and infrastructure. It housed archives, production hubs, and complex machine systems that would outlive empires. Even then, Mars was associated with technological mastery, but it was still part of a rational human civilization. Knowledge was not yet wrapped in taboo. It was used, tested, and expanded. Then came the collapse. Across human space, catastrophe arrived through multiple channels. Warp storms severed worlds from one another. Abominable intelligence, in the form of thinking machines and synthetic rebellions, turned against mankind or was turned upon by fearful humans. Interstellar communication and travel broke down. Planets that had depended on wider networks suddenly found themselves isolated, vulnerable, and often technologically unable to sustain the complexity they had inherited. This age, remembered as the Age of Strife, was brutal for all of humanity, but on Mars, it left scars that would define the future. The planet's atmosphere and surface ecology had already been under immense pressure due to industrial overuse. Political unity collapsed, factions rose, resources grew scarce, dust, radiation, failing systems, and war reduced much of the world to ruin. Much of Mars became a wasteland of collapsing domes, poisoned installations, and shattered vaults. Ancient technologies remained buried in the depths, but the civilization that had once fully understood them was dying. It was in this crucible that the machine cult was born. On a world where ancient reactors still glowed under ruined cities, where life support systems had become more precious than armies, and where the difference between survival and extinction rested on maintaining machines no one fully understood, a new worldview emerged. Engineers became preservers, preservers became guardians, guardians became priests. Over time, technical procedure fused with ritual, maintenance became liturgy, data became a scripture. The machine was no longer merely a tool, it was a vessel of sacred order in a world descending into chaos. This shift was not simple ignorance, though ignorance certainly played its part. It was also adaptation. If a reactor's exact principles were lost, but a repeated set of actions kept it functioning, then those actions became holy through necessity. If ancient devices seemed miraculous and irreplaceable, reverence followed naturally. If understanding was fragmentary, then mystery grew around every surviving system. In a collapsing civilization, ritual is memory made durable. What can no longer be explained can still be preserved through ceremony. The machine cult gathered force on Mars by offering something precious: continuity. In a world of fragmentation, it preserved skills. In a world of violence, it controlled critical infrastructure. In a world where flesh failed under radiation, famine, and war, it embraced mechanical replacement as both practical and spiritually meaningful. Flesh was weak, steel endured, circuitry remembered. The body could be improved, the mind could be augmented. The machine, unlike organic life, seemed capable of resisting the decay that had consumed civilization. As centuries passed, the priesthood of Mars solidified into a distinct culture and faith. Its members sought hidden archives, recovered technology from the wastes, and hoarded any fragment of usable knowledge. Competing techno-barbarian powers existed across the planet, but the cult's mastery of the remnants of ancient industry made it uniquely formidable. Control of fabrication, energy, and repair translated directly into political and military power. Mars was no longer simply a colony of mankind. It was becoming a forged civilization with its own religion, hierarchy, armies, and destiny. One of the most important developments in this period was the rise of the concept later known as the machine god. The exact origins of this belief are murky, layered with myth, doctrine, and reinterpretation.
Was the idea that all knowledge and all machinery reflected a divine principle of perfect order. Every machine contained a spirit, a fragment or expression of a greater truth. Proper understanding of machinery was therefore not only technical, but sacred. To preserve technology was to preserve divine wisdom. To misuse it was not only dangerous, but sinful. From this belief emerged one of the most famous teachings of the Mechanicus, the weakness of flesh. Flesh ages, sickens, tires, and dies. It is emotional, distractible, and vulnerable. The machine, by contrast, is orderly, logical, replaceable, and enduring. This doctrine drove the extensive cybernetic practices of the priesthood. Limbs were replaced with mechadendrites and servo arms. Eyes gave way to optical sensors. Vocal cords became vox grills. Internal organs were substituted with pumps, filters, and processors. High-ranking tech priests could become so altered that only traces of their original humanity remained. But this was never purely practical. It was devotional. Augmentation was a path toward purity, or at least toward a state the priesthood considered superior to unmodified human frailty. To become more mechanical was to align oneself more closely with the divine order embodied by the machine. Of course, this raises one of the enduring ironies of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In their pursuit of transcendence, they often become alien to ordinary human experience. They remain biologically human in origin, but culturally and psychologically, they drift far from humanity's common life. Over time, Mars became a patchwork of forge enclaves, data vaults, toxic wastes, deep catacombs, and sealed installations from the dark age of technology. Entire regions vanished under industrial shells and subterranean factory networks. The priesthood dug ever deeper, both physically and intellectually, searching the bones of the planet for fragments of the lost age. These expeditions recovered archaeotech, weapons, manufacturing systems, and relics whose purpose was sometimes poorly understood. They also unleashed dangers. Ancient labs, dormant war machines, forbidden intelligences, and unstable systems all slept beneath the red sands. By the time the Emperor emerged openly on Terra and began unifying the techno-barbarian states of Earth, Mars was already powerful. It was not a mere ally waiting to be folded easily into a new empire. It had become the center of a substantial independent civilization. It had fleets, weapons, industry, and doctrine. It had something the Emperor needed more than almost anything else if he was to launch his vision of galactic reconquest: the industrial and technical capability to arm and sustain a crusade across the stars. The meeting between Terra and Mars was therefore one of the most decisive moments in human history. The Emperor could not simply destroy Mars without wrecking the future he intended to build. Mars, for its part, could not casually dismiss the military might and charisma of the newly ascendant ruler of Terra. What followed was not a conquest in the normal sense, but a compact. This agreement is remembered as the Treaty of Mars. The Treaty of Mars bound the Mechanicum of Mars to the Emperor's growing Imperium while preserving a significant degree of Martian autonomy. The Emperor was accepted by the priesthood as the Omnissiah, or at least as the physical avatar or chosen manifestation of the divine principle they had long awaited. This was a masterstroke of politics, theology, or perhaps both. For the tech priests, it allowed integration without surrendering the core of their religion. For the Emperor, it secured the allegiance of mankind's greatest technological power without forcing immediate ideological annihilation. The term Omnissiah matters enormously here, because it sits at the center of Mechanicus belief. In simplified form, the machine god is the supreme divine source of knowledge, order, and machinery. The Omnissiah is the beginning of living embodiment or messenger of that divinity, the figure through whom the machine god is revealed or enacted in material reality. The motive force is often understood as the animating energy or sacred impulse flowing through all functioning things. Like much in Mechanicus theology, these concepts are not always presented with clean philosophical consistency. Different sects, forge worlds, and priestly schools may interpret them in varying ways, but together they form the sacred framework of the machine cult. The Emperor's acceptance as Omnissiah did not erase every tension. Even in later ages, there would be tech priests and associated movements with differing views on what exactly that title meant, and whether Mars fully aligned its theology with imperial orthodoxy. But for the purposes of the Great Crusade, the alliance worked. The Mechanicum supplied starships, armor, titans, weapons, void technology, data expertise, and industrial capacity on a scale that made imperial expansion possible. In return, Mars retained privilege, status, and freedom to maintain its cultic structures. This is the point where the hidden power of Mars truly begins to reveal itself. The Imperium often presents itself as a unified human state under the Emperor, but from the beginning it was built on major power blocks with their own institutions. The Mechanicum was one of the most important of them. Without its forge worlds, fleets, and knowledge, the Great Crusade would have been slowed dramatically, perhaps fatally. Every legion needed arms. Every compliance campaign needed transport. Every colony needed industrial support. Behind the shining image of reconquest stood the red-robed priesthood, turning raw matter into imperial destiny. As the Great Crusade pushed outward, the Mechanicum established and expanded forge worlds across human space. These were planets dedicated heavily, sometimes almost entirely, to production, research, excavation, weapon manufacturing, shipbuilding, and sacred machine maintenance. A forge world was more than a factory planet. It was an extension of Martian culture and authority. It housed tech priests, servitors, data looms, manufactoria, Skitarii garrisons, and often Titan legions linked to the Collegia Titanica. In effect, each forge world was a node in the greater machine domain of Mars. The Mechanicum also pursued the quest for knowledge, one of its defining missions. This was not research in the modern scientific sense alone, though elements of inquiry certainly survived. It was a sacred and often obsessive search for lost technology, STC fragments, archaeotech caches, and ancient systems from humanity's vanished golden age. Recovery of such relics could elevate a priest's status, empower a forge world, or transform military capabilities. Entire expeditions might be launched on rumors of an STC printout, a forgotten data core, or a buried complex from the dark age of technology. An STC, or standard template construct, is one of the most prized things in all Mechanicus lore. In humanity's great age of expansion, STC systems allowed colonies to manufacture a vast range of tools, machines, vehicles, and infrastructure using standardized knowledge adapted to local conditions. By the 41st millennium, complete STC systems are vanishingly rare or entirely lost, while fragments and partial printouts are treated as treasures of immeasurable value. Discovering even a tiny portion of an STC database can lead to new weapon patterns, industrial efficiencies, or the recovery of technology long believed gone. This pursuit shapes Mechanicus policy, exploration, diplomacy, and warfare. But if the quest for knowledge sounds noble, it is important to remember how contradictory the Mechanicus can be. The priesthood seeks knowledge relentlessly, yet fears uncontrolled innovation. It reveres ancient designs more than new invention. It preserves, copies, and repairs, but often distrusts experimentation that departs too far from sanctioned doctrine. Why? Because the Mechanicus remembers, dimly and imperfectly, that humanity's earlier ages ended in catastrophe. Because forbidden intelligences nearly destroyed mankind. Because poorly understood technologies can unleash disaster. And because institutional power is easier to maintain when knowledge is controlled, classified, ritualized, and monopolized. This is one of the deepest secrets of Mars. Not secret because no one can see it, but secret because few inside the Imperium can challenge it. The Adeptus Mechanicus controls not only machines, but access to understanding.
If they declare a design sacred and approved, worlds may manufacture it for 10,000 years. If they classify another design as heretical or suspect, it may vanish into sealed vaults. If a governor needs a reactor repaired, a regiment equipped, or a battleship sanctified, Mars and its priesthood stand between request and fulfillment. Knowledge is power, yes, but in the Imperium, knowledge is also rationed power, and Mars holds the valve. The Horus Heresy exposed both the strength and the fragility of this system. During that galaxy-spanning civil war, the Mechanicum split. On Mars itself, loyalties fractured between those who remained aligned with the Emperor and those drawn into alliance with Horus and darker powers. Kelbor Hal, the fabricator general of Mars, turned traitor, and massive conflict erupted across the Red Planet and beyond. For